All right, Matt Gouget, Get Better Everyday podcast. I'm excited to have my buddy Joe Rapozo from the neighborhood I grew up in. So I've known this guy for decades. Excited to have you on, man. Just talk about getting better every day. Talk about, some of your own personal struggles and a saying that came to me recently. Somebody said it and I really like it. The comeback always is better than the setback.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit, maybe just a high level, who is Joe Rapozo? Give us an idea of what you're up to, and let's start there.
Okay. So I grew up in the same neighborhood as Matt, out in College Green, Sacramento, California. I come from a pretty cool background. I winded up taking a path that wasn't the best for me, and sometimes I realized that I didn't really need to take the path I took, but it just kind of happened. Fell into it, and I got my life cleaned up about 8 years ago. So I was kind of a little longer than that, about 9 years ago. I was going through a lot of heavy drinking and cocaine and meth and stuff like that. And I started drinking in junior high school, smoking pot a little bit before that. And I said I would never do the harder stuff. You know what I mean? It wasn't going to be for me. And then somehow I just ended up doing it one day and I fell in love with it. And, once I got to methamphetamines, it took me out in about a year and a half. It was pretty fast.
Right. Yeah. It sneaks up on people. And I tell people this all the time, like good people make bad decisions, and before you know it, you're swept off, you're on the wrong path. And I think that, my mission is on this podcast is to inspire all people. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love for somebody who's struggling to listen to this, to hear this, and realize that you come across successful people every single day, but everybody's got a story, right? I've got my own story where I cleaned my life up 11 years ago, to this week, right? Just celebrate 11 years clean. And
congratulations, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And so anybody who's struggling on any level, whether it's with their health, whether it's with a substance, whatever the case may be, like it's not over. It's not over for you, right? There's plenty of people who come back better, stronger. They've got an appreciation for the small things in life. They've got, a hustle and a fire that far outweighs somebody who just walked through life, just catching rainbows and taking in the sunshine. I'd love to hear from you, because for everybody, it's different. Like, what was the turning point? What was it 9 years ago that got you to make a change?
So I was kind of looking at my life, just looking at it. I was like, dude, I'm not doing anything with my life. Like, I was living with roommates and stuff, and it ended up going sour. And I had to move back to my mom and dad's house. And I was 29, and I'm going, are you kidding me? And I was still leaving and going on benders, from my parents' house. And I was like, okay, next step is I'm going to be homeless, and the mess started really taking control of me, where I couldn't sleep, and some of the paranoia stuff started, and I was like, dude, this is getting crazy. And I ended up getting intervened by the cops one night, and they tased me and they roughed me up a little bit. And I came home and I was like, okay, that's it, I'm done. And I used again after that. And I was sitting at this park in the neighborhood I grew up, and I was like 2 a.m, and I was just thinking about life by myself. And I was like, dude, it's time to make a change. Like, it's time to do something with your effing life, because you had all these opportunities and done well, but you always seem to mess everything up. So I was able to get into an outpatient program, and that's kind of where my journey began. So I was sober for about 8 months, but I wasn't really doing much in life. I was just hanging in there, staying sober, and doing a little side work here and there. And I was really miserable being sober at 8 months sober. And I remember just being like, dude, what am I doing? You know what I mean? So why am I doing all this if I still feel miserable, being sober? And so I ended up relapsing for about a week. And that was probably the best thing that could ever happen for me. I ended up getting sent out. I went into the outpatient program and told them what happened. and told on myself. And they said, you know what, we want you to try a residential treatment program. So I was unhappy in my career. I was unhappy with life. And they sent me out to this residential program where I was out in Harold, California, and for 60 days. And it was just like, seriously, just like a boot camp for people in recovery. And there was like 50 men out there. And I just kind of started finding myself out there. And I decided, you know what, I want to do something different with my life. And then I noticed some kids were going to school to be counselors. So I talked to them about how they did that. And so I decided, hey, I think I'm going to be a counselor. And they had like a volunteer program out there. So I took on a volunteer program. Volunteer, it wasn't really, it was work. It was definitely work, but I was considered what they call a resident mentor. So I was like a volunteer counselor, kind of like something like around those lines, where I did a lot of their grunt work and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I stayed out there for a year, dude, as a volunteer while I went to school, and I was able to collect hours towards my counseling degree. And they had me go into all these support groups, and I had like a whole bunch of people that were taking me under their wing, the counselors there and stuff that worked there. And I ended up getting hired there. And that was kind of like a whole new world for me, man. Like I started being able to socialize with people again. I started being able to function and feel comfortable again, sober, and life just kind of took off, and I've never looked back, man.
Man, I love it. I love that story so much. And I'd love to get some insight, because I think that, this is going to land with a lot of people, and this is going to impact people. And that's the whole mission, right? Being so close to it, like you personally went through it, but then you also mentored people and were living and working in this environment. What would you say, like the most important things, or the things that people should really take into consideration when, like you said earlier too, like real fast, within a year and a half, like you're so far gone, you don't even know who you
Yeah.
are, where you are, what you are anymore. How do you go from that place to clean and sober and on a path to stay that way?
Um, you got to stay focused, and you got to be like ready to let go of your old way of life. It's really what it was for me. Like I had to be willing to step up and do a whole bunch of new stuff. I had to get out of my own way, and I had to be ready to I had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Like I had to do a whole bunch of like soul searching, and these people had me writing stuff about myself, and they had me learning how to help other people when I didn't even have that much to give, but I had a little bit more than the next person. So yeah, it was a huge thing, like just letting go, dude, of the old way of life. Like, okay, I can't surround myself with these people anymore. And some of the people that I had to put behind me for a little bit were good people, but they drank and they went to work and they did good things. Some of my friends that were before I got into the meth, like some of my good friends I grew up with that still drank and stuff like that, for a while I had to stay away from them because, hey, they don't have a problem with it, but I do, you start feeling, I could have started feeling resentful because, hey, why can they drink and I can't, and stuff like that. Or, it was just like, I need to start over for a while, dude, and just be surrounded by people that are sober and trying to do better and recovering.
Right. Yeah. And that's important to think about. Like the way you said it too. I thought to myself, like, in order to change, like it's hard for people, especially when you got a substance pulling on you. But I think sometimes I relate it to people that don't understand like how substances and addiction works, that it could be like food, right? And if you're used to
Yeah.
eating a lot of food and you've
Hmm.
done that for 5 years, you try
Yeah.
to restrict yourself and have 2,000 calories a day. Like it's not just a switch that flips. Like you got to stay
Hmm.
focused. You got to be like, think about the long term, and it's not easy. And so I've got a lot of empathy for people who are struggling. Everybody's got a different struggle, right? And it
Yeah.
could be substance, it could be a way that they're living, whether it's with relationships and how they treat people, whether it's their relationship with food, whatever it is. I love all that stuff you said, and I'm curious too, because um, you did that for a year. Are you still actively involved with mentoring and doing stuff inside of those homes?
Yes, I'm still a counselor. I stayed at that place for 2 years. And I got all my licensing basically started to where I was ready to take my test. And then I kind of moved on with my journey. I worked for a company that was subletted by CPS for about 3 years, where I worked with families and fathers trying to get their lives back on track, and clear their substance abuse or clear their CPS cases out. So I worked with them, learned a lot in that time, and then I was offered to go to another residential treatment program. So I stayed there. They ended up closing. So I moved on to another place, and now I work at another inpatient facility. Been
Okay,
there for about
cool.
2.5 years.
Yeah. Is it like a residential
Oh yeah,
house or it's actually a facility or?
I work at a residential home out in Fair Oaks. So it's so they live there. They come into us straight from detox. We help them get through detox, and then they stay for residential treatment, where we give them therapy, counseling, psychoeducational groups, um, and a whole bunch of holistic stuff that's now being kind of driven into the industry, such as like sound bowl and yoga and tai chi and acupuncture and stuff like that. So a lot of
Yeah.
CBT based stuff, DBT based, and still 12-step stuff too.
Yeah, yeah. Getting your mind right. Getting your mind right for sure, which is important. And I think that like
Mhm.
anybody who knows, like it's a big problem.
Yeah.
Whether it's alcohol or drugs. And I didn't want to skip past this too, because you mentioned something and it brought it up to me, knowing what I know, being in environments where people are drinking and whatnot. I don't take offense to the fact that somebody likes to have a couple drinks here and there,
Mhm.
right? And I'm, thankfully far enough removed, 11 years clean, like not touching anything where it doesn't bother me. I can go to a wedding and dance. I can go to these functions and whatnot, and people always think they're like, oh, this guy, not drinking, he's looking down on me. No, I know
Mhm.
myself, and I
Yeah.
know that like I can't have one drink, right? And so do you, man? You can have a couple drinks, go home, get a good night's sleep, wake up for work tomorrow, and like all good, right? But for me, it's not an option, right? Because
Yeah.
one turns into five, turns into 15, and it's all bad, right? So yeah, that's important for people to understand, is that it's not like you know a thing where you're just removing yourself, removing all that stuff from your life forever, and you can never talk to anybody who's ever
Yeah.
sniffed alcohol ever again, right? Like,
Exactly.
for a short time where we're close enough to the demons and the devil that you gotta get straight and get just around people that are really focused on staying clean, and then once you got a good grip on it. But it's one of those things where I talk to people all the time, and I try to help people and counsel people, not at the level you're doing it, but just being somebody that somebody can talk to. And I tell them, like, it's an everyday thing. Never did the steps, never did any of that stuff, but like, one day at a time is something that I've heard quite a bit. And that's the thing too, is like every
Yeah.
single day you're making a decision. When you go from eating 6,000 calories a day to 2,000, the first
Mhm.
week is really friggin' hard, right? But then after a few years of doing it, like that
Mhm.
decision to do that and live that way becomes a little bit easier. I think the same goes for substance and other things where, exactly like you said, you're changing behaviors, you're changing the way you think about things. It doesn't happen immediately. You just got to be focused on changing that, be a little bit comfortable being uncomfortable, and then over time you learn, because a lot of folks, it becomes a part of who you are, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and it's like riding a bike, you know what I mean? Like you're gonna biff all over the place, you're gonna fall and stuff, and then eventually you learn how to handle life again. You know what I mean? Like if you start putting in, for a lot of people, if you start putting in at a young age, you start drinking, using and stuff. When you get sober, you start having to learn how to handle every emotion and every feeling sober. So whether it be I'm happy or I'm pissed off, I got to learn, I got to keep going through that feeling enough times to where it becomes okay. I'm good being sober, dealing with that feeling, and it's a lot, dude, for a lot of people.
Right.
Um, that exposure therapy type stuff. Like um, the first time I went to a concert in sobriety, I left before it even started because I got like overfilled with anxiety. I was like, I'm not going to make it out of this thing. You know what I mean? I left. And then years later, I went to concerts. I go to them whenever I can. You know what I mean? And I have a blast. I don't even think about drinking. So it took time. You know what I mean? And I had to really get a hold of my sobriety and my recovery, get a good footing, and then I was able to start doing stuff again.
Yeah.
Uh, I have friends that drink, like you said. You know what I mean? I have friends that drink. I hang out with them. And that's okay. You know what I mean? They don't get, most of them don't get plastered. You know what I mean? Like I used to. I had a friend once tell me, he's like, "You're never gonna be able to have like a drink or two like me." I was like, "Do you remember me drunk, dude? You want me to try that?"
Yeah,
He's like, "No."
I'm good at having one or two, man. So I better just stay away. Yeah, I get you there. Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, some people learn that the hard way, and you know, like I said, like great people make bad decisions, and I think between you know, alcohol being readily available and it's you know widely kind of just accepted,
Mhm.
it's easy for somebody who doesn't have the control over it to fall into some really bad patterns.
Yeah.
And the same goes for you know, prescription meds. We could talk for 3 hours on this podcast about that whole, you know,
Yeah.
racket of an industry and all the terrible things that, you know, families are facing across the country because of that. But, you know, don't want to necessarily go down that. I just want, you know, people to hear this and realize that there is hope. Like you've probably met, you know, 100 people that have turned a really negative situation into something really positive. I
Mhm.
meet millionaires every single day, people that are highly successful in all walks of life who, you know, unfortunately had to hit a bottom, had to go pretty deep and have themselves half buried before they, you know, turn things around. I think that, you know, me sharing a little bit of my story and showing people that, yeah, even a guy like me, you look at me, you're like, oh man, like this guy never struggled. Bet your bottom dollar 2011 wasn't the best year for good old Matthew Mortgage guy, man. I was in a pretty dark place, but it's you know, it's good to share the stories to show people that you can turn it around. And for young guys like me and you, man, we still got 60 years ahead of us. We still got a lot of life left to live, and
That's what I'm hoping.
one foot in front of the other and keep
Yeah.
doing right. So I appreciate your time, man. Any
Uh-huh.
parting words, any words of wisdom or anything else?
Thank you for inviting me on the show. For one, it's been a pleasure. Um, if you're out there and you're struggling, there's help out there. Just look for it. You know, I used to search for people to help and stuff, and now it came to a time where I realized that there's so many people that need help. I wait for the ones that really want the help. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of help out there. There's a lot of people that are willing to sit next to you and show you how to get sober and walk side by side with you. So if you are going through a struggle like that, reach out.
Yeah,
Reach
I
out.
love that, man. I love that. Yeah, because there's a lot of people struggling, and when they're ready, rest assured, there's people that are willing to help.
Yeah. When I used to try to save them, like people would get like irritated with me and upset. And then I gave up on that and people started calling me, you know, like from the past and stuff like that. And I was able to help them, which has been great.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, there's a lot of help out there.
good stuff, man. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Yep. Have a good one.